So this is Marty with Marty's Diesel, and today we are going to be troubleshooting an electrical problem. I kind of already started going over this, and I decided, you know what, let me go ahead and make a video on this. So as of right now, I have both a multimeter and a test light over here on the battery. Anytime I want you testing, or anytime you are testing for an electrical problem, I want you to take your multimeter and or test light, and I want you to test it before you actually get started. Make sure that your multimeter is reading. Make sure you have good battery voltage, okay? Because poor battery voltage can skew your results, and it can also make this truck, you know, like either the pump might come on, but it might be weak. The pump may not come on. It all depends. So realistically, you want to make sure you've got good battery voltage, and you want to make sure that both of the tools that you're using right now are currently working. So right now, I believe I have the key on, but I'm going to go turn it off real quick. Okay. When we turn this off, we've already verified that our battery, we've got power and ground at our battery, and everything's working just fine there. Our trigger wire, which by the way is actually backwards inside of here, it should be facing this direction. Small problem, not a big deal, but it could be a big deal. That's actually how it's supposed to be sitting, okay? So with the key off, using our test light, I've already verified that we've got power at the battery. I'm gonna come over here and make sure I've got power on both sides. If you do not have power on both sides, it is most often because this little button right here is tripped and you've got to click it, okay? But that's not our problem today, but we've got power on both sides. And I know that that's good, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that cover back on there. And then if you look all the way in the back, you see this little, U-wire right here? I'm going to make sure that we have power all the way in the back there. And we do, okay? So that means that we're getting power to the relay. Now, this right here is the 87 wire, and it goes down to our fuel pump. Right now it does not have power because we don't have the key on. This is your signal wire, okay? Signal wire. It does not have power because we don't have the key on. And then this is your ground. Technically, you should have a good ground there at all times. So I'm going to switch my test light over to the positive side of the battery. And when I come back in here on this ground, it lights up. So that means that my ground is good, power to the relay is good, power on both sides of this circuit breaker. Okay, everything's good there. There is obviously no power here yet because we do not have the key on. What I can also do now is I can show you how to do this test with a multimeter, okay? Now why is it important is because your test light can actually light up on less than 12 volts. And sometimes you can have a voltage drop. And if you've got a really bad voltage drop, it might illuminate the test light, but it actually will not power the pump on. So to do this properly, I like to test both ways. So what I'm going to do now is I'm looking over there. There's my multimeter. I've got my 12 volts right here. I'm going to test this next. I've got my 12 volts. I'm going to test all the way in the back here. And I have my 12 volts. I'm also going to test for continuity. Put it on the audible setting. And I'll make sure that my ground has good continuity. And it does. For testing purposes, if any of those items fail or don't work properly while you're performing these tests, you need to figure out why before you go any further, okay? I'm going to pause this video. Actually, no, I won't. I'll just hop down. I'm going to go turn the key on. Key is now on. So now our trigger wire and the trigger side of our relay should have power. All right, so I'm testing this 5 amp fuse that we do. Oh, give me 1 second. I got to switch back to the ground on the battery. I've got power on both sides of this fuse. I've also got power on my trigger fuse, like the one that I took out in order to put my ATA fuse in. So everything's good there. If not, you got to figure out, you know, what's going on there, why that thing's popping. But I don't know that I've even ever seen this guy right here pop unless I found the wire rubbing somewhere on the inner frame rail here, or inner fender well here. But the fuse below it, I do see it pop somewhat often, and if you have this installed incorrectly, it can actually kill power to this fuse. So you got to be careful and make sure that this thing is installed properly. Next, we're going to come over here. I've already verified that I've got power there. I've got power there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that back up real quick. Now that I've got the key on and my trigger fuse has power, I should be able to look at my trigger wire, and it should have power, and it does. And then I should be able to look at the wire that goes down to the battery, the fuel pump, and it does. So right now, everything up here looks like it should be working just fine. When I go underneath the truck, we're going to find out what's actually wrong here. So you want to find a suitable ground, and technically, this bolt typically gives us that. Okay, I already double checked that though. I checked continuity with another bolt on the frame to make sure that that was a good ground. So this is one of our older black plugs, and this is actually one of the reasons that we went away from this one. I don't know what happened here specifically, but this customer told me that he had been messing around with it, couldn't figure it out. That's why the truck's here now. But what I've learned is that this plug, okay, let me see if I can do this with two hands. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I guess the retaining pin inside the plug is broken. So you see how this is moving in and out? I hope you can. Also, the other thing is that this wire should have power. This red wire should have power. And I've already verified that I've got a good ground. Take a look. I've got no power. So I'm going to have to follow this wire setup all the way back up, you know, underneath the engine bay there. And I'm going to likely find that there is an issue on that circuit. What the correction here is, or, you know, the way to fix this is I'm going to replace, well, because we're here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to put a new plug end on this. But the correct way, actually, no, look, somebody's been probing these wires. So I will be replacing this pigtail. Okay, and then I will be replacing this wire as well, all the way up to where it's connected to the relay and or the ground up there. So this is available on our website to go to the gray plug, the Deutsch connector. It's a more robust connector. It's less likely to have whatever issue this is right now, where it's allowing, you know, basically the pin to move freely around in there, unlike what it's supposed to do. So look at that. I actually knew something was up when I saw that right there. So either way, I'm going to get this thing fixed up. We're going to get power back down to this pump, and then likely this pump is going to kick back on. But just as a reminder, your first step in diagnosing why your fuel pump does not come on is to always start with the electrical. This is the second fuel pump assembly that showed up to me that either had a wiring concern, like there's two in this particular case. This pin's coming in and out, which technically if you just push that back in, I bet you that would be fine, but we don't have power here. I did also check for ground. We have ground down here, so the issue's actually just on the power wire. I'm going to figure that out, and I'll maybe show you guys what that is. But either way, two of these fuel pumps showed up not working at our shop, and both of them were wiring harness issues. In this particular case, I don't know who installed this, but I do know that, you know, somebody's been poking around in here, and that's never good. Don't ever do that. Don't ever poke the wire to test for power and ground. We recommend that you scrape a little bit of this liquid electrical tape off and you test for power and ground at the actual studs on the pump. And then the other wiring issue that we had is it was just rubbed through on the frame. It was just poorly routed through the frame, and it just literally rubbed through. So on the ground side, actually. And that's why we specifically tell you to test for power and ground at the pump or at this plug. Because if you use your ground from somewhere else, like I just did right here, okay, If you do it like that and you never test your ground, okay, you actually could have a ground wire problem and not actually have anything wrong with this power side, but the ground would stop this pump from coming on too. But I already made sure that I've got continuity with that. I can get the multimeter underneath here and maybe try to get that on video. That's probably going to be pretty tough though by myself. So let me try that real quick. Alrighty, and just because even though I already did this off video, I'm going to do it for you guys on video. I've got my ground to my multimeter hooked up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to test in here. Oh, it just fell off. Give me 1 second. Alright, got it reconnected. We're all good over there. And I'm going to test for continuity. And I'm looking at the multimeter right now, and we are at 0.1 ohms of resistance. So we are good. There is no issue with the ground on this side of this plug. Technically, I would be having you test here, but I already know that I don't need to because we found the issue here in the plug. What I'm going to do is replace this and replace this because I already saw somebody's been, pushing a, circuit tester in there, and we don't want that because that right there is going to introduce corrosion into the wires. See those? The insulation there has been pricked. I don't like that, so we're going to go ahead and put a new connector on there. So I'm going to run a new wire here, and that's going to fix up his issue. We have a lack of continuity from the relay, which is up there, 87. We already tested, we have power there. We've got an issue that, we don't have power coming down here. We'll likely find that the issue is either in the crimp or somewhere along the wiring harness. But we'll get him a new wiring harness put on here, both ends here, the long and the short version. And he'll probably be back in business ready to rock and roll in less than an hour. Alright, so I went ahead and started with the swap here. You can see this is our new Deutsch connector versus our older Weather Pack connector. Obviously they do not plug into each other, so you are going to have to replace both sides of this harness. I'm hooking up the ring terminals on the fuel pump right now. You've got to make sure that you put the red on the positive plus side and that you put the black on the negative sign on the fuel pump. You can actually see them right on the face of this fuel pump. If not, you can actually see that right on my website too. But I'm going to go ahead and continue working here and getting this thing plugged in, but I just wanted you to see kind of like the difference between our gray plug and our black plug. So the Deutsch connector and then the old Metropack style connector. And a little pro tip here, whenever you're installing the new nuts on the pump, you can't just use like a straight socket because it ends up binding up against the body of the pump and you can actually break the studs off. So you want to have something that has like a little bit of wiggle to it, like this or this here, so that you can get in there and kind of like tighten it down at a little bit of an angle, but you can stay square on the nut. I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this thing on. So while I'm plugging the wire that goes down to the fuel pump, take a look at what I found. I'm not sure what happened here, but this is why we don't have power. I'll try to get to zoom in, or not zoom in, but focus. There we go. No good. So we're continue replacing this harness, but that right there is going to be what the problem is. All right, so I went ahead and replaced the harness that comes up from the fuel pump itself. So here is where the power wire goes, and then what I also did is I consolidated the grounds. One of the grounds the customer had running to the battery, the other ground the customer had here. I went ahead and put the ground for the relay there, and I also put the fuel pump ground there. So now we only have one ground that we need to be paying attention to anytime we're trying to diagnose this. So he got a new wire here, new terminal here. That's why typically I send out like a big fat terminal and like a skinny terminal as well. That way if you want to combine them you can. If you don't want to combine them, you also don't have to. The wire, like I said, from the fuel pump, number 87, we've got power there now. Well, we had power there before, but we got power from here all the way down. And here's your ground. And now, obviously, the fuel pump is on because we are making 60 PSI. So let me get underneath there. Hang on 1 second. So here I am underneath the truck. Basically, I got new liquid electrical tape on the wire terminals, and I basically create this little like service loop, and I have the wiring harness like nice and secured right here. Notice I don't have any hard bends. Nothing's pulling out on this wire here. Nothing's pulling out on the wire there. I got a nice slow bend right there to take it up over top of the frame. Also, where it goes over top of the frame, you might not be able to see it, but I actually have it zip tied to the body, and then I have the face of the zip tie in between the wiring harness itself. Well, at least I did. I gotta mess with that again, I guess. But basically, I got it that zip tie, the bulk of that zip tie, kind of in between the wiring harness and the frame. Basically, just everything I can do to keep that from rubbing as it goes across right there. But other than that, I just ran the wire forward, just kind of how it was before, and all is well. Now, I will say this. Listen to this pump. Pump's cold to the touch, but when it's making noise like that, that typically means that you've got an issue pre-pump. That's going to be the next thing I'm going to look at for this customer, but that's for another video. Hopefully, maybe you guys learned something. Maybe this helped you out, but basically it should, allow guys like me to talk to people like you on the phone, and you guys can like follow along with your own problems and hopefully maybe possibly get them figured out. All right. Thank you very much for watching.